Hi everyone, it's Bonita from Pennies to Dollars, and today we're going to talk about decluttering those heirlooms. How many of you have things like this? Things like this that were passed down to you from your family that you are responsible for, that you were entrusted with. What do we do with these things? Let's get busy and talk about it. Several of you have shared with me that you are the ones that have ended up with things from your family. I can identify with that. I'm the only girl. My dad left me all of his share of heirlooms that had been passed down from my grandparents. And I have 6 children, 3 are girls, 3 are boys. And over the last few years, I have started trying to downsize. We've talked about decluttering before, but this is a whole other area of decluttering. Decluttering heirlooms. I have things that were my great-grandparents' wedding gifts. I have so many things like this that have all of this history. And you don't want those things to be forgotten, but what do? I'm reaching my upper 50s and I need to make decisions on what to do with these things. Over the last few years, I've started trying to give some of these things to my children who want them. Several of them have taken a few things, but I have kids in all different phases of life. I have some that have established a home, some have yet to establish a home, and they are still moving about in apartments. Some don't have the space for them yet. Some of them don't have china cabinets. Some of them still have small children. Different things like that. Some of them have different goals and aspirations as they move towards life, and being stuck in a house with a bunch of heirlooms they're responsible for isn't their idea of a good time. So I have kids in all different areas of those realms, and they are taking what they want, that they find value in, and I am still left with a lot of things to make decisions about. And maybe you are in the same boat, or maybe you don't have anyone to leave things to. There's lots of different videos on Swedish death cleaning and how to begin that whole process of trying to downsize as you're getting older. And I have some of those as well, and I will link those on this video. But we are specifically talking about heirlooms in this video. We're assuming that the other things that we have that we've been able to make decisions about, or that we know the decisions won't be as hard as they are on these items. These are the toughest items that people find, and these are the items that actually keep people from wanting to start decluttering, because their minds automatically jump to, what am I going to do with the hard stuff? And they just get frozen in that thought and don't even want to start. But we're going to assume we've gotten through some of the easier stuff, and now we're thinking about some of the harder stuff. So it seems like my generation, and maybe the one below me, my kids, are the ones that still have a little bit of that obligation, maybe, or that desire to keep things. And we're in the midst of that transition where maybe you even have some kids that find the value in that, and some kids that do not see the value in keeping that stuff. We are in the midst of a lot of minimalist thinking, including myself. I would love to be more minimal. And then we're in the midst of people that have a lot of consumerism that has been the biggest part of their lives. And so newer, better, bigger, shinier are the things that are the most attractive. And these things are things that are not in that category at all. And so it has caused a lot of family heirlooms to be less desirable to pass on or to receive. There tends to be a lot of guilt, a lot of responsibility, obligation, history, and connection to those that we have lost that are attached to these things. And sometimes maybe our own mortality in knowing that we are now old enough that we need to make decisions about these things. All of those things are things that we need to actually do a little bit of soul searching and determine where we are at mentally with some of this stuff. And that can slow down the decluttering process. This is the area where we kind of get slowed down and bogged down trying to make decisions, because these are important items with our family history. If you get to a place where maybe you have all sons and the daughter-in-laws don't want them, or you don't have any children at all, or the children you have don't want this stuff, what can you do? What can you do to try to preserve some of that history for your family? Can you look beyond that? Can you look at nieces, nephews? Can you take that a step farther and see if maybe some of those people didn't get the opportunity to get some of these things? For instance, with me, I was the only girl, it went to me, but there were other siblings of me and their kids didn't get that opportunity. So can you take it a step farther and look at that and see if some of those people might want to preserve some of these items? They may be excited to get that chance, and at least it is still staying in the family. You could also look at grandchildren. Is there something you can leave for your grandchildren? Is there grandchildren that are getting older that might see the value in this? If you have grandchildren that don't really see the value and you think that they would just sell those items, then keep looking if you really want those items to stay in the family for someone that you know would see the value of those and would keep them and pass them on. And of course, there's always the opportunity to sell those items. I don't know how many antique collectors there are, because as we talked about with minimalism and consumerism, it's very possible that a lot of people are just not finding the value in those things like we do. Like I said, I think we're maybe one of the last generations in our 50s that are seeing the value in some of these antique items, or even wanting to display them. And if you are able to find family members that might be interested, give them a timeline to decide if they want these things, or it's just going to go on indefinitely. That's one of the mistakes I think that I've made, is I asked my kids, I've re-asked my kids, I've reminded my kids, and some of them seem interested, but yet the stuff is still here. So maybe put a timeline on that to see if you can actually get it to its new owner. And one of the things that I love that my aunt did is she took some of the heirlooms when my grandma was still alive, and she labeled them. She got my grandma to tell her, where is this from? What's the significance of this? And see, this was a wedding gift to my grandmother in 1926. So things like this that have the label and the history are so important, whether they go to your kids or even if you end up selling this item. Keep those labels on there that go with the item to preserve that history. It's so important. Even people that buy these items want to know the significance of them. And then it helps you to know that it went to a good home, a home that really wanted that item and will preserve it. And then remember that just because an item has history doesn't mean you have to keep it. Sometimes the history is sad. Maybe it's tied to sad memories. So just because an item has that history doesn't mean you have to keep it. Just because it was mother's doesn't mean that you have to keep everything that was mother's. It might not have even been that important to mother, but yet we hang on to those things because it belonged to someone that we loved. So if you run across those things, remember to keep the things most special, the ones with a history, the ones that you know the history of, the ones that you want to pass on to someone with that history, and maybe let some of those other things go that you don't really know the history and you just know that it was mother's, and that's about all that you know about it. It's so important to be able to open up some of that space in our homes and enjoy the space that it brings us without the guilt that goes along with disposing of some of these items or giving them away. Just because they were given to us doesn't mean we have to keep them until we pass away, and then they get given to the next generation. We can pass them on now and appreciate the joy that they bring the people that truly chose to make them part of their home. I know I have enjoyed so much watching my kids take things that meant a lot to them and keep them and then use them in their homes. And they weren't things that were pushed upon them or forced upon them because I passed away. They were things that they chose based on their memories and what was important to them from our family history. And that has brought more joy to me by being able to do that rather than waiting until they are just given to them or someone has to clean out my home. So in conclusion to this, go in layers. Look at these items, and if you can't make a decision, revisit them later. There's been so many things that I've looked at and I can't make a decision. And then I move on to something else that's maybe an easier decision. And then I continue to revisit that later, and maybe it takes 2 or 3 times to be able to make the decision about that item to decide what is best for that item and what is best for you. Keep the most important items that are tied to memories and history for you. Just like my kids picked the items that were more important to them, and then offer these items to other family members and give them a time frame to collect the item or make a decision about whether or not they want it before you dispose of it. That helps your guilt and your obligation for these items that you've been entrusted with. You know that you've given everyone the opportunity to decide if they want it before you clear it out. So I hope this video on how to decide about heirlooms and what to do with heirlooms has maybe helped you a little bit. And can you please share in the comments if you've experienced this and if you have any other ideas other than the ones that I have brought out today. I think a lot of us get stuck in that process and it just gets to be too much, and then we just go on to something else and we just leave that china cabinet full. And going through those things and clearing those things out is just one more thing that doesn't cause us stress when we look at it. Because even though it is a loving, historical item from our history, in the back of our mind, we know that we still haven't made a decision about that it is still in our home, and that we don't know what's going to happen to it. So I hope that this has been helpful to you. Please share in the comments if you've experienced this and any ideas that you have for those of us going through it. And I hope to see you in the next video.